I'm recording an emergency episode for you with the interim results of the negotiations between Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky in Washington. Right now, the closed part of the meeting between the American president and the Ukrainian president with European leaders is taking place. And right before this closed part of the meeting between the Europeans, Trump and Zelensky, there was a short press conference where the Europeans spoke. Trump and Zelensky expressed their positions. Regarding security guarantees for Ukraine, the future peace agreement, the issue of a ceasefire, and in general, how the collective West currently sees the end of Russia's war against Ukraine. Let's sum up the interim results now. My name is Pechy. It's August 18 on the calendar. And before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, write any comment you want, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There I post breaking news as it comes in. Most of the time, even faster than here on the YouTube channel. So I'll start with the main point. In the White House, it's not just cosmetic changes anymore, but real political engineering. That is, they have already started shaping the future within the framework of a peace agreement. And Trump has publicly established two pillars of his framework: Ukraine's security and the absence of a mandatory ceasefire on the front line. When asked about NATO's Article 5, he replied with a phrase I believe will be today's headline. He said the following: "We will give them very good protection, very good security. That's part of the deal." And right away I added that there won't be an immediate pause in the fighting. Quote, "I don't think a ceasefire is necessary for negotiations. A peace agreement can be prepared while they're still fighting. Strategically, this might not be advantageous for one of the sides. The signals, as you understand, are mixed, but the stated intention is clear: to launch a negotiation track right on top of ongoing hostilities. As for sending American troops, Donald Trump promised to announce his decision later today. He said the United States will still provide security guarantees for Ukraine. And he admitted that yes, American troops may be involved in providing these guarantees. And the second pillar that Trump announced is the distribution of the burden for those very security guarantees." His formula sounds simple. And at the same time, he highlights the most sensitive line of the possible agreement, saying that territorial exchanges are on the table. He quickly adds some optimism. Quote, "I think there won't be any future aggression. This is by and large overrated." That is, he doesn't believe that Russia will attack Ukraine or any other countries again in the future, which I think is just too exaggerated. And Trump is adding more than enough optimism here. The question is this bargaining an attempt to impose a framework or preparation to pressure Kyiv? There is no answer yet, but the logic is clear. Security, yes, an automatic NATO Article 5 as a security guarantee for Ukraine. Not exactly, definitely not right now. This issue is being discussed in a closed format. There will be no ceasefire at the front. Exchange of prisoners of war as an option in a future protocol. A separate detail of today is the promise of a direct line with Moscow after the meetings are over. Today, Trump says, "Putin is waiting for my call. This is an important moment." The White House is publicly establishing such a hotline of communication. So the process is really being carried out in such a multi-step mode. That is Washington, Kyiv, and then the European group, then another call to the Kremlin. And for us, this is an indicator that the discussion of the guarantee architecture is no longer an abstraction. It's a concrete procedural matter. That is, they are really already discussing how this should actually work. I recorded a separate episode on this topic. How can security guarantees for Ukraine be effective, even without joining NATO? So go to the channel and be sure to watch the separate episode. What does Kyiv say? Kyiv holds the line without sentimentality. To the question of what guarantees are needed, there is a short and extremely direct answer, says Zelensky. That means all the weapons, training for the armed forces of Ukraine, equipment, intelligence, and so on. In a separate address before entering the White House, a phrase was spoken that is worth remembering. He says pressure must work, and it should be joint pressure from the United States and Europe. We need to stop the killing. Kyiv thanks efforts to end the war, but stresses that peace requires strength. It's not just a diplomatic sample, if you will. This is a statement that any guarantees must be based on building up the real power of the armed forces of Ukraine, not on some paper insurance. Europeans. They're in sync but not monotonous, which is important. Macron started with a declaration of purpose, saying that everyone around this table stands for peace, and immediately kind of steered the discussion toward a ceasefire, at least to stop the killing. At the same time, he broadened the scope of the conversation. According to him, security guarantees for Ukraine should become a matter of the entire European continent's security. This is a key remark for Paris. This is about safeguarding Europe's entire security system, with Macron stressing that Ukraine's security is part of European security. Germany's position, is a bit tougher on the procedural part. Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, breaking this American link of peace without a ceasefire, says directly, and I quote, honestly, we all want a ceasefire at the latest by the next meeting. And then he says that he can't imagine a three-way meeting between Putin, Trump, and Zelensky without a real ceasefire on the front before it. This is an attempt to include in the roadmap that very ceasefire regime, even if temporary, but definitely mandatory. So Merz is saying, listen, there can be no talk of a three-way meeting without a real ceasefire. Then we'll see Putin's intentions. It was such an obvious stitch, of merging the positions of Washington and Brussels, and right in front of the press. Merz stated it publicly so that Trump wouldn't try to dodge it later. Is London playing the role of a translator here, between idealism and realism? Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, honestly spells out both the moral and the mathematics in his address and says the following: we have to do this right. The world must be strong, fair, and honest. At the same time, he allows for support of a peace deal where a ceasefire is not a precondition, if the deal itself stops the killing and is secured with guarantees. This is, a kind of diplomatic juggling, but it fits perfectly into Trump's logic of the process. On the fly, provided that Ukraine's security doesn't become just an empty name. Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, strangely enough, is talking today about the mechanics of future guarantees, about the technicalities. She is promoting the idea of a cluster inspired by Article 5 of the NATO Charter, but outside Ukraine, within NATO. This is a reservation where partners say they are ready to act in case of another attack, as she stated. As Meloni states, this is a bridge between Trump's United States involvement and the European "we will take on the burden." For Kyiv, the advantage here is obvious. A framework for these security guarantees is emerging, where Ukraine is not in NATO, but security is provided collectively and seriously. There is a certain, uncertainty about the trigger, when these security guarantees are activated and the level of commitments involved. And now let's move on to the most delicate and sensitive topic. These are possible territorial exchanges. The very fact that this wording was voiced in the presence of Zelensky and Europeans is already, a shift in positions. Here, Zelensky's own sobering statement is important. It's on a slightly different track. He says Ukraine is ready for a real ceasefire and new security framework, but Moscow won't stop its aggression on its own. So joint pressure is needed. There were no hints from Zelensky about agreeing to redraw the map, And of course, this needs to be repeated every minute while this Pandora's box called territorial exchange remains open at the diplomatic table. So what overall picture is forming at the moment? First, the White House is pushing for a deal involving the United States with a greater financial and military contribution from Europe, promising very good protection for Kyiv, but without a formalized Article 5 of the NATO Charter. Right now. Second, Europe is divided not over the issue of peace or no peace, but over the procedure, because some European capitals are demanding to formalize a ceasefire. Already at the next step to stop the bloodshed and not allow Moscow to raise the stakes under the cover of negotiations. And the other part says, we agree not to support the idea of a ceasefire if it actually results in a real peace agreement. Third, Kyiv does not compromise its principles, saying that strength is needed, joint pressure on Russia is necessary, and everything should be done for the Ukrainian army. And by doing this, it raises the cost of any territorial experiments for the West. There's another important detail that's easy to overlook. When Trump says he's waiting for my call, Putin, he's not just talking about the schedule, he's showing who's going to, I don't want to say run the show in the corridors where the drafts of the future agreement negotiations are being written. But Trump is definitely hinting that, well, he will coordinate his position with Putin. And the more actively Europe, clearly spells out a package of guarantees, money, air defense, ammunition production, and so on, the less temptation the White House will have to replace real protection for Ukraine with some nice words and phone diplomacy. Kyiv knows this and is pushing for three things. It's about joint pressure for the army, not rewarding the aggressor for aggression. And the final chord at this stage, I emphasize because the results will come a bit later after the closed meeting. The peaceful architecture is finally getting a framework. This includes United States participation, European guarantees, and a separate communication line with Moscow. Before the framework is set, like the weapons list, legal text, guarantees, and the ceasefire status, all that remains undecided for now. Well, it's like scaffolding, which is shaky and could collapse at any moment. And every public statement is like this supposed good protection, territorial guarantees, joint pressure, what's next, ceasefire or not, territorial exchanges, and so on. All these statements, can shake up that scaffolding. The future structure of security guarantees, and accordingly, whoever is the first to solidify this whole structure, to reinforce it, will actually be the one to dictate the security architecture. That's why it looks like this at the moment. We'll see what comes out after the closed session. So for now, I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. See you all next time.